Ukraine is a country in Eastern Europe. It is the continent's second largest country with over 40 million people, a booming agriculture business, and some beautiful landscapes to add up to the nation's greatness. However, Ukraine is also known for a less flattering fact, which is his neighbor Russia. And unless you live under a rock, you know these two countries are in conflict, in the center of the greatest European tragedy since the Second World War. Millions fled the country and flooded the West as refugees. Over the next year, Russian artillery shells turned the country into ruin. In occupied territory, Ukrainian civilians suffer under Russian barbarity in war crime after war crime. Yet despite all the suffering, Ukraine remains independent. Despite the horrors of war, Ukraine has fought back against the Russian hordes and managed to defeat them. From Kiev to Kharkiv to Kherson, the Ukrainians have pushed back the Russians and have since forced them into the defensive. All of which couldn't have been done without the massive amounts of Western aid sent to Ukraine, especially by the United States, who has become Ukraine's main supplier by a long shot. However, in the United States and in the West in general, politicians are starting to become wary about the situation in Ukraine. They're starting to believe that aid is not worth it and saying that we should minimize or outright stop giving aid to Ukraine. This is what I'm here to argue against. We must keep giving aid to Ukraine for the following reasons. Number 1. Helping Ukraine will set a standard for international law. Number 2. The victory of Ukraine will secure America's dominance over the global stage. And finally, number 3. Aid will help Ukraine prevail in the most dangerous and crucial part of the war. But first, let's do a brief history, shall we? The modern history of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict can be traced all the way back to 1991. This was the year when the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR, collapsed. Out of the rubble of the former superpower came the two nations of Russia and Ukraine, which were by far the most powerful of all the post-Soviet republics. Once gaining independence, Ukraine faced the question of all post-Soviet republics, which was whether to join the West or remain in close ties with Russia. This question would dominate Ukrainian politics all the way until 2014. That was when Viktor Yanukovych, a pro-Russian president of Ukraine, was ousted from power. And just a few days later, the Russo-Ukrainian War began when Russia annexed Crimea and started funding separatist organizations in the Donbass region. Since then, the United States has sent millions to Ukraine, totaling around $2.7 billion by 2021. Of course, this was all before Russia escalated the war by directly militarily invading Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. Since which, the US has given over $50 billion worth of military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. This means that the backup of the United States is vital for Ukraine's survival. Now moving on to the reasons. International law is a relatively new concept. It states what a nation state can and cannot do while projecting its power on an international stage. In this case, it is the prohibition of the threat or use of force in international relationships, especially on another fellow sovereign states. And, well... Not only did Russia violate Ukraine's sovereignty, it has also committed several war crimes while occupying the territories. Some notable war crimes include the infamous Bucha massacres, as well as the deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children into Russian territory. Russia is completely ignorant to international law. Ukrainian aid will not only show that we condemn these acts of war, but also strengthening the boundaries of international law and saving Ukraine in the process. However, Ukraine's not the only one benefiting from this agreement. After decades of the Cold War, the US has finally emerged as the one and true superpower in the world. Its military and economical might are unmatched by any nation in the history of the world. Yet, with all this power comes many great enemies, and one of them is Russia. Bitter about their loss in the Cold War, Russia has done everything it can to stop America's expansion. This includes proxy wars and their alliances with countries like China and Iran. Russia is a large country geographically with the military means to exert its influence across Eurasia. This makes it a massive threat to the geopolitical interests of the United States. And by invading Ukraine, Russia just provided America with the prime opportunity to destroy them. And with the aid they've already sent to Ukraine, it's doing massive damage to the Russian military. Ukraine has already destroyed a lot of Russia's mechanized vehicles and manpower and has bogged them down in the east of the country. All of this with just a tiny portion of the US's GDP. By sending aid to Ukraine, the United States is steadily neutralizing the threat of one of its greatest adversaries. We need to give this aid with haste, because here's the thing. This stretch of time between January 2023 and January 2024 is the most crucial moment of the entire war. Russia has failed several times in this conflict, and this is mostly the fault of ineptitude and systematic corruption. And as much as we laugh at Russia for its horribly out-of-date military structure, Russia is far from defeated. Reports say that the Kremlin is planning another mass mobilization of the Russian population. Russia is taking its last gambit this year. They either win this year or lose hundreds of thousands trying. Ukraine needs the help of the US more than ever, and yet, despite this, many in Congress are skeptical. And this is where we address the opposition. Those against aid tend to show it from an American-centric viewpoint, that America should focus on America first rather than some faraway country in a distant land. Many also point out that aid may trap Ukraine in conflict and restrict peace talks. They also worry that our money and equipment are falling into the wrong hand. Money into corrupt politicians and equipment into neo-Nazi organizations such as the Azov Battalion. These are all valid concerns, and some of them have even been proven right. Yet, despite this, Ukraine has also shown that it can use our aid responsibly. Ukraine has turned the tides of war several times, like in Kharkiv and Kherson, in groundbreaking offensives that pushed back the Russians. As Chuck Schumer said, the worst thing that Congress could do is give the Russian President Vladimir Putin any sign of wavering commitment to Ukraine. Aid is not only vital for Ukraine's security, but also for the security of the United States. Now, after watching this entire video, you may have one question on the back of your mind. What does this have to do with me? And as it turns out, a lot. As arguably the most important geopolitical event of the 21st century, this conflict's outcome can change the history of the world for generations to come. The lives of billions of unborn children around the world could be shaped by this war. Therefore, it is in our interest to build a future for these people. A better Ukraine today could mean a better America for tomorrow.